So where we're starting today is I'll just share the screen of where we are. If you're not looking at a screen, we're on page 84 of the big book. And last week we made an awful lot of progress. We managed to discuss the whole line, love and tolerance of others is our code, right at the bottom there, fifth line up from the bottom. However, there are a couple more things I want to say about tolerance. The basis for tolerance, according to the big book, is actually the top of page 67. I've just flipped to the top of page 67. It should appear on the screen. And in the middle of the step 4, when you've discovered that lots of other people are absolutely rotten and they do the most rotten things and they make you feel rotten, the book asks you to consider a few points. Though we did not like their symptoms, and that's what we've written in the second column of the resentment inventory, their defects of character as expressed in their behaviour and the things they say, and the way these disturbed us. So that is what we've written in the third column, all of the 7 areas of self which are affected. And here's the key to tolerance. They, like ourselves, were sick too. And the key part of that is like ourselves. So if you're paying very close attention to the book at this point, you'll realise that the book has the temerity to accuse us of being sick, which doesn't seem very kind or polite, but there it is. Now, the notion here that I use is that what sickness means. My spirit, by its nature, can't be sick. But I can be blinded by self, by ego. And I go off on jaunts of my own, on frolics of my own. I go off and do things which I think are going to make me happy rather than trying to do what I think God wants me to do. And that's what sickness is. It mustn't be used as an insult of others or of ourselves. It's simply the observation that there are times when I fall asleep, and when I fall asleep in my dreams, I run after money or sex or 100 other things of the world. Now, having observed this, when I'm asleep, I don't know if any of you have ever tried this. When you're asleep and you're having a dream, try and wake yourself up. It's not very easy. You can want to wake up and you can't. Or you wake up and you didn't want to, and you're not very happy at being woken up. But what is clear in any case is that waking up is not a voluntary action. So what sickness means here is I'm asleep. So I can substitute that. They, like ourselves, were asleep too. So if other people are behaving badly, they're asleep. That's all. What am I going to do? Am I going to blame them for acting out in dreams they're dreaming because they're asleep? I don't know if you've ever tried to have a conversation with someone when you're asleep in a dream. It's very difficult to get other people in the dream to do what we want them to do. It doesn't work. So the basis for tolerance is recognising that people cannot be other than they are. On the Chabad website, there's a very good lecture by Rabbi Shais Taub about honouring your mother and father. And he says he gives this lecture because it's very difficult to honour your mother and father, because they've done stuff you didn't like and you're just like them. And one of the things he says, and he says, you'll probably disagree with this, but I believe it's true, is that our parents, and this is true for anyone, is doing the best they can with the tools they have available at the time. Now, it doesn't mean to say that their behaviour was perfect, but they couldn't have done otherwise in the moment. And this is how, according to the Big Book, I'm to view other people. So it talks here on page 67 about sickness, and later on it's actually going to, let's see if I can find the passage. Yes, so here we go, page 108. Try not to condemn your alcoholic husband, no matter what he says or does. So that gives me absolutely no exceptions, no matter what he says or does. By the way, when you're doing the resentment inventory, the second column must be restricted to what the other person says or does, because that is the trigger for the resentment. He's just another very sick, unreasonable person. So it's repeating the idea of sickness. And unreasonable, when I'm in ego, when I'm in self, when I'm out to make a name for myself or improve my reputation or control other people's conduct in an unreasonable way, or I'm after some sort of goodie from the world, I'm unreasonable. It makes no sense. Treat him when you can as though he had pneumonia. When he angers you, remember that he is very ill. So this is the basis for tolerance. It's seeing it as someone not being very well, but always retaining in mind the notion that it is us who are unwell at the same time. And here's the absolute killer. If one wants to eliminate self-righteousness when observing other people's character defects, there's a well-known idea that when I'm observing someone else's character defects, when I'm observing someone else's ego, by definition, I'm viewing them from the point of my own ego. So if I think someone else is in ego, I'm in ego. If I wasn't in ego, I wouldn't be observing it. I'd be observing an entirely different picture, which is a perfect child of God who is asleep. So when it says, let's go back to 84. When it says love and tolerance of others is our code, love is what I'm doing at the best of times, and tolerance is what I'm doing at the worst of times. But the attitude in both is the same, which is to treat other people with love and to treat other people with tolerance, to see people as perfect children of God who at worst are asleep. And there's another book where it suggests that every action that someone else takes is either an expression of love, in which case it calls for a loving response, or it is a call for love, in which case it calls for a loving response. So either way, whatever someone is doing, the response must be a loving response. I'm going to unshare the screen for a moment. Does anyone have any questions or comments, or would anyone like to share on those ideas? If you would like to share, just unmute yourself and come in and share. Or if you have a comment, you can say something in the chat box. Anyone who's calling in, you won't be able to unmute yourself. What I would do if I were you, if you have questions, is have one of the participants who is present online on their WhatsApp, and WhatsApp them and get them to ask the question. So there's Emma and Elisheva and Osha and some other people who are here online. So callers, if you want to participate, that's the way you can do it, and then I can unmute you on request. So no questions from that passage, anyone? Or any comments? Yes, Sarah Rivka, unmute yourself.
was wondering if you could address, it's a controversy that I've heard different opinions, that if you're dealing with somebody who's extremely abusive, like mentally ill, abusive in a criminal way, so some people say the most loving thing that you could do is to not have contact with them, because that's reality check for them that their behavior is unacceptable. And then other people say that's a cop-out. And I'm wondering what you think about that.
Well, that's one of the $64,000 questions, isn't it? So to repeat the question, in case the question didn't come through to the recording, which is very possible, what do you do with someone who is very abusive? A friend of mine tells a story about a friend of his, a woman who had a 16-year-old son. And the 16-year-old son was not a bad person, but was a tearaway, was a, as they would say, juvenile delinquent. And she spent a lot of time shouting at him. And my friend said to her, when you shout at him, does it change his behaviour? Does he listen? She said, no. He said, when was the last time he listened to you? She said, 4 years ago, when he was 12. Then he listened to me. And my friend said, so you've been shouting for 4 years and it hasn't changed anything. When are you going to stop shouting? My fundamental observation with extremely difficult people, people who are extremely unwell. Now, there is a spectrum here, so I encounter this most often with sponsorship in AA. So I've sponsored several hundred people over the years, so I've had I've had some experience, shall we say, with people who are extremely ill. I've been people who are extremely ill. And there is a spectrum. So at one end of the spectrum, people can be very, very ill in all sorts of ways, but entirely cooperative. In the middle of the spectrum, there are people who are obstructive or difficult in a practical way. Their sickness gets in the way of the job that needs to get done, which is to progress the sponsorship, to progress their journey through the steps. But with the application of all sorts of Al-Anon black belt tools, you can negotiate a way forward. So you've got some boundaries, you've got some redirection there, you've got various types of request and invitation and so on. And some of those people, a lot of those people, can be brought within the bounds of acceptable behaviour, conduct which is acceptable enough that you can proceed. It's not ideal. It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of energy, but you're getting the job done. And then, there are people who are so unwell and so obstructive and so vexatious or damaging or aggressive that no amount of boundary setting or cajoling or skillful behaviour is going to result in a workable situation. And it's in those situations that I have to recognise my absolute powerlessness. And some people give up too easily. I have the opposite defect. I tend to hang on far longer than is good for me and is good for them. And when I finally let go, recognizing my powerlessness years after other people recognize my powerlessness, the sigh of relief can be heard from 50 miles away as I finally relax and let them go. And very often, my experience is that very often when you let them go, they start to get well. So that's the spectrum when I'm trying to, and this can be with, I've had this with employees when I employed people. I don't employ anyone anymore. I've had this with employees, with students at the university I teach at. I've had this with sponsees. I've had this with family members. There is a further point I would make about people who are extremely unwell. There are certain types of behaviour which are, people will call them red flags or red lines or all sorts of, people have different terminology. But there are certain things where if it happens once, I'm done, life's too short, get out. Physical violence, threats of physical violence, and real aggression. I mean, sometimes people can be aggressive, but you can tell they're upset and it's coming out at you and you're in its presence. You happen to be there, so it's being directed at you, but you know that it's not about you. Sometimes the threat or the aggression is very personal. And I have a zero tolerance for that. I won't accept that on any level. I won't. If it happens once, that's the end of it. So I'm not going to give you a right or wrong answer on there, but those are two ways of looking at that. Is this someone that, albeit with work and difficulty and obstruction, we can get the job done, or not? And then secondly, what are my bottom lines? So in the S fellowships, in some of the other the process addiction fellowships, they have these notions of bottom lines, things which you must never do under any circumstances. And I have bottom lines as well with behaviour with other people, things that I will not let that into my experience more than once. If it happens once, it's going to happen again. If I don't stop it, it will happen again. Does that go some way to answering your question, Sarah Rivka? Okay, good. Any other questions on this love and tolerance business? Osher, do you want to unmute yourself? No.
Hi, I'm Osher. Thanks so much, Tim. I was thinking while you were sharing about tolerance toward myself. And so my question is that when I catch myself being sick, as you described, or sleeping, I understood one of the messages to be, and I wanted to ask if I understood correctly, that I can't necessarily wake myself up. In other words, I see it, but I'm not necessarily able to correct it immediately. And so is that time that I ask for help from my higher power.
Thank you. So I think the first point is, as soon as you realise you're doing it, I'm afraid you've woken up. So that is the point at which I have to go to the higher power. There is a story about step 6 and 7 that people tell. And it's about a man who walks down a road and he suddenly finds himself falling and discovers himself at the bottom of a huge hole in the road. And he clambers out, dusts himself off, and he goes home. And the next day, he walks down the road and he falls down the hole. And as he's falling down the hole, he thinks to himself, you know what, I fell down this hole yesterday. And he clambers out and he goes home. And the next day, he is walking down the road and the thought crosses his mind for a moment, I really hope I don't fall down that hole today. And then he thinks about something else, then he falls down the hole. Day 4. He's walking down the road. He's thinking, I mustn't fall down the hole. I mustn't fall down the hole. I mustn't fall down the hole. He falls down the hole. He sees it coming. He sees himself falling, but there's nothing he can do to stop it. The 5th day, he stays at home because he knows there is no way he can walk down the street without falling down the hole. The 6th day, he wakes up, he walks down a different street. The problem is not the hole. The problem is the street. Chuck Chamberlain, who was an AA member, who is credited, rightly or wrongly, with bringing spirituality back into AA after it turned into drunkalog after drunkalog after drunkalog in the 1950s and 1960s. And I think he really did a lot of work to transform AA. He tells a story, I think, about a Texan, for what it's worth, who was big and tall and terrified of dogs. And he wanted to investigate why, as an adult in his 40s or 50s, was still terrified of dogs. So he went back through his life and he recalled that when he was a child, maybe 6 or 7, he was bitten by a dog. And for a little while, this satisfied him. He thought, well, this is a good explanation. If I was bitten by a dog as a child, maybe that's why I'm frightened of dogs now. But it didn't fully satisfy him, so he investigated further, and he asked himself, why was I bitten by the dog in the first place? And he recalled what happened that day, and he was chasing this girl. And in the course of chasing this girl, the girl's dog bit him. And he said, I went through my whole life being bitten by dogs, not realising I was being bitten by dogs because I was chasing girls. So the point at which the problem arises is not the point at which the problem originates. And one of my Al-Anon characters, I think of my sort of Al-Anon defects not as being individual defects, but as being whole personality types. And one of my Al-Anon personality types is Florence Nightingale. If you're not familiar with who Florence Nightingale is, she was a nurse in the Crimean War that had a little lamp and went around saving lots of people in the Crimea. And I can be like this in AA meetings, that I can get a kick out of, in my imagination, I'm the one that is going to help this person, to save this person, to fix this person, to take them from darkness into light, and, all of that, messianic stuff. It's not pretty. And I know none of you have ever tried to fix, save, rescue someone, but maybe you have a parent who did. So that's the level on which you might have to start identifying with that. Now, for a lot of years, I kept getting burnt by people who were very, very unwell and essentially wanted to suck me into the drama. And there's a very curious pattern that I've noticed. You see, I kept wanting to try and help this particular personality type, but then would beat myself up because I kept getting dragged in, I kept getting sucked in, I kept getting suckered by the manipulative behaviour. And, I've done it again, I've done it again. When I recognise my powerlessness over this type of person, and I severed a number of relationships, and it's a brutal term, but it really was that. It was literally, I cannot have any further contact with you. I wish you well on your journey. You're going to have to talk to different people from now on. Now, not only was that a solution to those relationships, when I'm in that frame of mind, people who are up for that game don't even ask me to sponsor them. They ask someone else. Maybe someone that will play the same game, or maybe there's someone that won't play a game at all. Maybe someone that can genuinely help them. So the way to not get sucked in to those treacherously slippery relationships is that the solution lies much earlier, much further upstream. It's got to do with my basic attitude to what I'm here to do, which is to present the program to people in AA. If you want it, great. If you don't, that's fine. I'm not going to push, I'm not going to prod, I'm not going to encourage. I'm the dinner lady, I take the food, I slop it onto your little metal tray, and then you go on to the next counter. When I approach people in recovery with that complete detachment, I don't get into the situations where I'm going to get sucked in the first place. So back to your question of, should you be compassionate with yourself? Well, absolutely, but you've got to find out why you keep being bitten by dogs. What are the girls that you're chasing that are causing this problem in the first place? And it's the same, I think it's the same with any other character defect. Any character defect I have comes from me wanting something. Now, the thing that I want, it's not necessarily, £100 billion. It's not necessarily an evil thing. It's not necessarily, domination of whole continents. It might be, well, I would just like to have a nice day. As long as I can have a nice day, then I'm going to be nice to people. It may be, I just want to keep my job. I just want my income to be... you get the idea. The things themselves that I stake my happiness on are not necessarily bad things. They might be misplaced, but they're not bad things. But the sting in the tail of that basic attitude that I want these other things to be my higher power is that I'm going to get bitten by character defects further downstream. So to recognise that when I'm acting out, it is because my basic attitude is wrong. I haven't got God as God, I've got something else as God. Any other questions before we go on? Tracy? Oh, I can't hear you. We haven't got audio for you, Tracy, I'm afraid. I don't know if you can type in the chat bubble. Can you type in the chat bubble on the top right? Can you talk about the difference between need and want? Yeah, one uses the terms needs and wants. But I think the distinction is it's one of convenience more than anything. So in the step 4 resentment inventory, when I'm looking at the 7 areas of self, so why something bothers me when I haven't got my own way, I do make a distinction between security, which is the basic so-called needs of life, and ambitions, which is the higher wants. However, over the years of doing inventory myself and helping other people do inventory, an awful lot of people classify things as needs when they're not strictly necessary for life or for happiness. And I'm going to give you some examples. Viktor Frankl says somewhere or other that the only thing you actually really need is hope, that everything else is negotiable, but that's the one thing that you need. You lose hope, that's the end of it. But hope is the thing that you need. I'd expand on that by saying, to be okay, I need 3 things: identity, purpose, and security. That's identity, purpose, and security. The identity is my spirit is of God. My purpose is to do stuff for God whilst I'm in this material realm. That's the purpose. And my security is really a function of the other 2. Since I'm spirit, nothing can happen to me. Everything else is negotiable. If I'm here for another 5 minutes, or if I'm here for another 40 years, I don't care. I'm going to be somewhere, maybe not here. Anne Lamott talks about death being a fairly major change of address. So when I die, I'm going to move somewhere. I won't even need removal people. It's not. That's why it's a fairly major change of address. You don't need to notify anyone. You just go. I mean, what could be? You think of the difference between that and moving house. Moving house is hard. So, my needs really are identity, purpose, and security, but those can't be threatened because they come from God. Eckhart Tolle, Tolle, talks about this rickshaw driver in, Calcutta or Bombay, who has the most wretched life in a material sense. None of his needs are satisfied, but he's perfectly happy. So the notion of wants and needs, I can't even be bothered to start thinking. As soon as I think something is necessary for me, I become attached to it and I become hypervigilant. Is anyone else just occasionally hypervigilant? There we go. So like the internet connection flickers for 2 seconds and immediately you're on high alert, you're staring at the router. Is the little light going to go off again? If it goes off, will it ever come back on? What happens if we, and then for 2 days, every 8 seconds, I'm looking at the router to see if it's flickering again. As soon as I classify something as a need, I'm sunk. Rabbi Tzvi Freeman, who I think is very good, says, if God thinks it's a need, I'll have it. If I haven't got it and I think it's a need and God hasn't given it to me, it can't be a need, otherwise I'd have it. Because that's in the morning blessings. God provides me with all that I need. So if I haven't got it, apparently I don't need it. Who knew? I can think I need something. If God doesn't think I need it, I won't have it. Now, that makes things a lot easier, because you can determine whether you need something by whether or not you have it. And this goes back to, what has this got to do with the big book? Well, on page 63, it says, he provides us with what we need, provided we stay close to him and perform his work well. So that's how I can define what a need is. But this is the thing about God. My friend Tom says that God is of above average intelligence. So I don't need to figure out for God what my needs are. God is like totally there already. It's not like God is, you have to guess what your needs are and ask me, otherwise I'm not going to give you what you need. It's not some weird guessing game on television with, prizes. All I have to do is stay close to God and perform his work well. I'm going to move back to the screen with the big book. Right, and we have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol. So I'm just going to look at that line. We have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol. Actually, I'm going to read a little further to give that a bit of context. For by this time sanity will have returned. We will seldom be interested in liquor. If tempted, we recoil from it as from a hot flame. We react sanely and normally, and we will find that this has happened automatically. We will see that our new attitude toward liquor has been given us without any thought or effort on our part. It just comes. That is the miracle of it. We are not fighting it, neither are we avoiding temptation. We feel as though we had been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. We have not even sworn off. Instead, the problem has been removed. It does not exist for us. We are neither cocky nor are we afraid. That is our experience. That is how we react so long as we keep in fit spiritual condition. So I'm going to copy that into the chat box for everyone. So I think it's worthwhile looking at that from the point of view of alcoholism and AA before extending it to say, well, how can we use that in other contexts? Now, it says a peculiar thing. It says, our new attitude toward liquor has been given us without any thought or effort on our part. It just comes. Now, that mustn't be misread. Sometimes people misread that to say, all I have to do is just sort of sit here like a potato in an AA meeting for 9 months and then I'll be given this new attitude toward liquor. Now, what it actually means is that we don't have to try to force ourselves to acquire this new attitude to alcohol. There is thought and effort on our parts, but it's not to conjure a new attitude toward alcohol. It's to develop a relationship with a higher power which will solve our problem. Actually, I'm going to go back to the book because there are all sorts of relevant passages to this. Just excuse me for a moment. So this is page 45. Lack of power. That was our dilemma. We had to find a power by which we could live, and it had to be a power greater than ourselves. Obviously. But where and how were we to find this power? Well, that's exactly what this book is about. Its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. Now, that's a very interesting passage, because it suggests that you have one problem. Now, when I'm sponsoring people in England, I might say, do you have any children? And occasionally someone says, oh, yes, well, I have, one child or two children. If I'm sponsoring people in Israel, I basically have an application form with boxes. How many children do you have? 0 to 5, 6 to 10, 11 to 15, 16 to 20, a lot of children. And so now if you've got a lot of children plus a husband, and you can add that to the number of children, you may think you've got more than one problem. I know, having lots of sponsees, it's sort of like having children, except they don't live with you yet. It may seem that you have hundreds of problems, each one complex and interesting. But what this passage is saying is that you only have one problem, and all other problems stem from that. Now, solving that problem, which is what Chuck Chamberlain calls the sense of conscious separation from God, who is the source of all knowledge and strength. There's actually something on 85, I think. Yes, much has already been said about receiving strength, inspiration and direction from him who has all knowledge and power. Now, all means all. It doesn't mean some. So if God has all, then no knowledge and power has any other origin. So the effort and thought required is the effort and thought required to establish and maintain that relationship with God, where I am nothing without God, and God is everything. And that does require a lot of thought. It requires a lot of effort. You've got step 4, step 5, step 6, step 7, step 8, step 9, and then practising steps 10 through 12 on a daily basis, like your life depends on it, which it indeed does. And that is the solution. And my sponsor is fond of saying, the solution lies in the solution, not in the problem. Which always makes me wonder why we spend so much time talking about the problem sometimes in meetings, but that's another question. So this solution which is given to us, which is that we have a new attitude towards alcohol, which is, I don't even want to drink now. I don't work for that directly. I work on something else, and then that is given to me as a bonus on the side. And as I said earlier, as I suggested earlier, my problem, I think my biggest interpersonal problem is getting entangled with complex, unwell people thinking I can help them. And that doesn't get solved by me solving that problem. It gets solved by me staying close to God, and I find myself automatically detaching. So viewing what is going on objectively, recognizing there is little or nothing I can actually do to help someone that doesn't want to be helped, but wants to dance a dance which makes it look like they want help when they don't, in order to relieve their feelings of guilt. That objective distance is what I get with... That's what it talks about in Al-Anon when it talks about detachment. So there's that wonderful detachment flyer, 2 pages, that's all it is, 2 pages. And what that flyer talks about is objectivity, which means seeing what is going on without any personal involvement in it. So I'm the neutral observer of what is going on, so I'm not on the screen, I'm watching the screen. And it is that position of being the observer rather than the participant which gives me the objectivity. And as I say, I don't get objectivity. Like a character in a film can't be objective about can't step outside the film to recognise that it's a film. It's like what we were saying earlier about being asleep and dreaming. You can't place yourself outside the dream. But the one thing which does seem to be available is to seek God under any circumstances. That's the little red button I can push in any circumstances. I seek God first, and then the objectivity is given, the detachment is given, and then automatically I find myself letting go. I find myself not engaging. So when it says we have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol, we have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even family members, even sponsees, even our home group, even the political establishment, even capitalism, even socialism, like whatever you want to fight. Now, the reason that I have stopped fighting by and large, and sometimes I make a mistake and I end up in a conflict situation, and it never feels like a conflict situation. It feels like I've got a legitimate role to play here and I need to fix something. When I finally let go, it's always on the basis that I can't change anything anyway. The only thing that can be changed is me. The only person that can change me is the higher power. So I have to seek the higher power, and then my being will change, and that will affect change in the world. The one thing which I've talked to a lot of friends about with this notion of we have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol, is, does that mean if there are terrible things going on in the world, you just ignore them and say, well, it's none of my business, I'm not going to fight anything anymore? My personal decision, so this is a very personal point of view, there are certainly other solutions, is that I'm so naturally not detached from things. When something goes on in the world, I'm the first person to start squawking about how wrong it is. This does not mean that I'm the most useful person, because I'm the first one to get upset. But does this mean I have no responsibility? No, I think I have a huge responsibility in the world. But what I do, and this is an idea from Concept 8. So you can pick this idea up, and if people say, well, where did you get that idea from? You say, well, I got it from Concept 8, and then say nothing else. You'll impress everyone. So the General Service Board of Alcoholics Anonymous in Great Britain comprises 20, I'm going to say something naughty, 20 old, white, straight men. There are a couple of women. But anyway, so that's the General Service Board. They do a very good job, I'm told. Great. This is wonderful. But they're honorary trustees of the charity Alcoholics Anonymous. They have jobs, or they're retired, or they have families. They're not on the job the whole time. So they have to delegate their the actual tasks that they have to perform in two ways. First of all, to volunteer subcommittees of the General Service Board, and I used to be on one of the subcommittees for several years. And secondly, they delegate to the various offices. So there are physical offices. There's one in York, and there's one in London, and I think there's one in Glasgow. There may be a couple of others as well. So they stay in charge of major decisions of policy and finance, but the implementation is done by someone else. I think it's probably because I'm in the world of recovery, or I needed to be in the world of recovery. I'm not really well suited to conflict type jobs, to conflict type things that need doing in the world. I would make a horrible politician. I would make a horrible activist because I can't maintain the detachment. It's hard enough to maintain the detachment with the things just immediately around me. I'm not going to run looking for situations which are conflict-ridden in order to then have to detach more and more and more. There's other stuff that I can do and I'm good at. But I can delegate. And this is the idea all through the 12 concepts, is the notion of delegation. You take something which is your responsibility, but you delegate it to someone else to implement. So with the things that are going on in the world that I have a view on and where I think something needs to be done, I view it as my job to earn as much money as possible in the career that I've chosen in order that I'm in a position to give as much money as possible to organisations that can do good on my behalf, that I don't need to get involved in every single activist campaign. I can let other people do that. And so I do what I'm good at, which is making money in the career that I have, and I let other people do the fighting. And so I give money to charities, I give money to think tanks, I give money to all sorts of things. And it's not because I'm good, it's because it's the higher power delegates me money and resources to do things in the world, and that's what I'm guided to do. So we have ceased fighting anything or anyone doesn't mean that in the world where things need doing, I don't have a role to play. But the question is my role a direct role for me to take direct action? And I've got friends in recovery who are political activists, who are very good at it and can remain detached. I've got friends who are literally politicians or other public figures who are able to remain detached. Good for them. I can't do it. So I don't. So I found a way of being responsible without being super engaged. Does anyone have any questions about that passage?
Hi, Tim.
Yes, hello.
It's Randy. I'm just on the phone. I just want to give a message to whoever is on the phone can press star 6 to unmute themselves.
So you can press star 6 to unmute yourself. Marvellous. So does anyone have any questions there? Or comments? Would anyone like to share?
Tim?
Yes.
Hi. I'm on the phone because I couldn't get on the internet because I didn't know the password in, and I know other people have the same problem. So I don't know where you sent it to. Are you meeting next Sunday?
We are meeting next Sunday. I'll put the way I'm doing the password. Let me just get the link. Now I'm sending this in the chat bubble for people who are...
But I can't get on to see the chat bubble.
I know, but I'll come to that in just a moment. So I'm sending the link to the people who are online, and the link is to a little note which gets updated whenever the password has to change. I'm probably not going to change it for next week. It doesn't look like we're going to be Zoom bombed, so I think we're fine. But there's a link there. You can always go to that link. Now, the people...
How do I find the link? Can you give me the link?
It's difficult. It's lots of letters and numbers. What I'm going to say is, so in England, Emma has got the link. In Israel, Elisheva has got the link. Sarah Rivka, do you have the link? You've got... Yes, Sarah Rivka has got it. So are you in contact with either Elisheva or Sarah Rivka? Okay.
All right, thank you.
So, and if you're not in contact with any of those, just, speak up and we'll find a way to get you the link for next time.
Okay, I assume Elisheva is on the WhatsApp in Jerusalem. Can you ask her?
Yes, she's nodding. She's
Okay.
nodding.
All right, so I'll contact her through the WhatsApp. Thank you.
Yeah, and O'Share as well will be able to provide you with the link, and Mazal and some other people as well.
Okay, I have posted it on the WhatsApp, but nobody got back to me. But maybe because they were on call. Okay, so I'll get it for next time. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry for disturbing.
Not at all. So I'm just going to see if there's anything else on that passage. Yes, so at the end of that passage, it talks about... Sorry, let me just mute a couple of callers. There we go. At the end of that passage, it says about this new reaction we're given. That is how we react so long as we keep in fit spiritual condition. And now that's a very vague term. That could mean anything. So let's have a look at what fit spiritual condition means. In the Big Book, there are 7 points in the Big Book where it says, if you do this bad thing, you're probably going to drink. Or if you don't do this good thing, then you are probably going to drink. So there are essentially 7, positive and negative commandments there. And now this is in no. It's easier to remember than 365 and 248. But let's see if I can even remember those 7. So the first one is resentment. So if I remain upset at anything, that's not fit spiritual condition. That's something else. The second one is behaviour. Oh, by the way, the page reference for that from memory is 65. The next one is behaviour which harms other people. Now, we're occasionally going to do things which harm other people by accident. Not good, but it's going to happen. But it's where we're not willing to amend our behaviour, where we're essentially willfully doing it. So willful harm of other people, which can be, or self-justified harm of other people. And the page reference for that is page 70. And then it talks about secrets on pages 73. Page 73, it talks about secrets. It talks about not making all of our amends. That's page 77. Having creditors that we're not facing. I think that's page 78. It's somewhere around there. And by creditors, as you know, I'll come to the detail in a moment. You've got creditors. You've got, that should be 5 of them now. Then you've got page 85. It talks about resting on our laurels, which means past success in the program. So you've worked very hard in the past and you think, well, marvellous, I'm in a good position now. I don't have to do as much because I've done it. That's complacency. And the last one is in Bill's story, bottom of page 14, top of page 15, where it talks about if an alcoholic did not perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, he couldn't possibly withstand the certain trials and low spots ahead. So what this means is to stay in fit spiritual condition, I've got to do a number of things. This is having completed the first 9 steps. And by completed, I mean having completed every amend that I'm aware of in steps 8 and 9, in as far as I can find the person, in as far as they're willing to have me make amends to them. So to take those 7 one by one, I've got to be taking daily action to clear away any upset so that I have a clear channel to the higher power. I've got to be pretty brutal with myself about not permitting behaviour which hurts other people. No secrets is the next one. And so I don't hold stuff inside myself at all. As soon as there's something which would be a secret, if I didn't tell anyone, I just tell someone straight away. Not later that day, not in 2 days' time, I just tell them. I find someone and tell them. If I need to make amends, I asked my other half once, do you feel guilt ever? He said no, because if I make a mess, I clear it up straight away. That's easy, isn't it? Creditors. Obviously, we have, under law, credit relationships with mortgage providers and so on. What the book talks about is unfaced creditors. Now, I take that one step further, and I think it's true that if I have an obligation which I'm not meeting, I cannot be comfortable. If I'm not doing the service I'm supposed to be doing, if I'm not doing the work I'm supposed to be doing, if I'm not returning the phone calls I'm supposed to return. So facing my creditors means facing my obligations, those people that I owe. Not having complacency, the easiest way not to have complacency in my life is to have a daily structure that will ensure that I'm practicing steps 10 through 12 on a daily basis. And if I have the structure, structures become habits. And then complacency takes care of itself. It's just not a problem. The last one is work and self-sacrifice for others. And I think that as well is largely structural. In terms of service I do in the world of recovery, sponsorship and my family and other obligations. So that's the work and self-sacrifice for others. That's built into my day. It's built into my schedule. So I don't need to think about it. I don't need to worry about it. Where I need to be most vigilant is with the upset, the resentment stuff, page 65. And that can come in all sorts of subtle, insidious forms. I need to be very careful about that. I need to be very careful about secrets. Now, the way you realise that something is a secret is if mentally you start... When I start to justify my behaviour in my own mind, that means that's probably something I wouldn't want everyone in my home group to know about, because things which are patently good don't need justification. So when I'm self-justifying, I'm probably dishonestly trying to pretend that something is better than it is, and that's where the secrets lie. So those are the two things that I have to be most careful of in order to maintain fit spiritual condition. Upset and self-justification of bad behaviour. Emma, have you got something you want to... I can see the mouth moving.
Yeah, I was going to type it so I didn't disturb you. What do you mean Okay, so I really have two questions. One was complacency, the daily structure. I'd like to know exactly what you mean. So does that mean step 11 in the morning, step 10 throughout the day, being of service to your sponsees, or is it more specific, like spiritual readings? I don't know. I think I'm much more of a practical person, so I need tangible kind of ideas to understand exactly what you mean. I think that's one. And the other thing is if you tell one person, sometimes that can still be a secret, and I'm not sure why that is, but sometimes it can, especially if it's somebody you're very close to in program. It can still be between us. So yeah, I think I think that's where does that work?
Okay, there's a very good question. So with the avoiding complacency through structure, is I dedicate some time first thing in the morning to step 11. I dedicate some time last thing at night to step 11. Now, what I do within that time may vary. That matters a lot less than the fact I'm giving it time. So I won't start working in the morning until I've done some step 11. I never just go to sleep. I've got a prayer book by my bed. I always read as much as I can stand. Sometimes it's half an hour, sometimes it's less than that, or some other spiritual book. And that's just non-negotiable. I just do that. Other things I currently have, it changes hugely over time. I mean, we're in an abnormal situation at the moment. But, I'm doing a morning meeting at 7 a.m. I'm doing an evening meeting at 7 p.m. My best friend and I always debrief after the evening meeting, and we talk about the day. So there are some things there which are built into the structure. I have a deal with myself that I return sponsee phone calls as soon as I can, and at most within 24 hours. And that whole combination seems to be enough to keep me in check. So that was the question about complacency. The second question was, it was brilliant, but I can't remember what it was.
It was, sometimes you can tell one person can still be a secret.
Yeah. Okay, there are two types of secret. Type 1 is where you do something unseemly by accident, or carelessness, or negligence, and you don't want it broadcast, but you need to tell someone you're very sorry, you're really not going to... You may do it again, but you're working on it, and you may tell a sponsor and a couple of friends. The second type of secret is where I'm doing something in my life structurally that is not good. It could be, and I'm justifying it. That can be in any domain. It can be some form of dishonesty with work or with money. It can be in the sexual or romantic arena. It can be persistent ill temper with sponsees. It can be all sorts of things. But it's where I'm finding an accomplice within AA who often has the same defect, who I'm getting to countersign it, like you get someone to countersign a check. That's the type of secret. What I don't want is anything. I don't want a systematic behaviour pattern or structural element in my life to be there, which I wouldn't want which I wouldn't be happy with anyone in my home group knowing about. If I'm doing something systematically which I need to conceal from people in my home group, there's something wrong. Now, with the slip-ups, we're all going to have slip-ups. And of course, you wouldn't want those broadcast, particularly in your home group. But they're the sort of thing where, if the moment came, you'd be totally happy to share, last week I did X, Y, and Z. Now, you're not going to make a display of yourself. You're not going to turn yourself into a circus at every home group meeting and trot out all the wicked things you've done over the last 7 days. There's a point at which candour in AA can start to become repulsive, where people try to trump each other with how wicked they are or how disgusting they've been. So I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the ability to disclose stuff, presenting it as errors. If I keep doing it and I'm basically not sorry, I'm doing something which I'm having to justify, that's the stuff where it's no good just telling, a good friend about it, because the whole system is fundamentally flawed. So the easiest way not to have any secrets is actually not to do anything that needs to be kept secret. If I'm not doing anything that needs to be kept secret, that whole thing just takes care of itself. And there's an enormous freedom in that. And my observation in AA is that, and I've got friends who've noticed this as well, is that people with secrets, it gives off an atmosphere. You don't know what it is, but you know there's something there. And when that behaviour stops, sometimes you discover years later that there was a particular point at which the behaviour stopped and the whole energy in the room changed. And so it's doing things which I don't want broadcast. That's the thing which is the essential problem. Having behaviour which I'm justifying to myself. Does anyone... I think we're drawing to the end of our allotted time. Does anyone have any other questions or comments for today? Good. So what I'm going to ask Elisheva and Emma and Sarah Rivka and Osha, I think Osha's gone, to do is to... if you distribute to people that link to the password, it'll probably be the same next weekend, unless if I start to experience problems with people hacking my account, I may change the password, but it's unlikely. But if people have that well in advance, we shouldn't have any problems next weekend. Oh, Elisheva, yes.
Could we ask the woman who spoke before what WhatsApp group she meant? Because I sent it on one, and apparently it's not the same one.
I think it was caller 6. Let's So caller 6, can you tell us which WhatsApp group you asked for the link on?
Yeah, it's the Jerusalem Serenity Group.
Elisheva's not aware of
Hello?
that. Yeah, yes, Elisheva's not aware of that. Elisheva, do you want to come in?
Well,
Elisheva, are you on Reflections of Hope?
yes.
Okay, so I sent you a message there on Reflections of Hope right now.
Brilliant. So does anyone have any other questions? Good. Can I just say you've got wonderfully positive names of your groups in in Jerusalem. That's marvellous. So we'll meet again, if you care to, next Sunday at 10 a.m. UK time. The recording from today will be uploaded, hopefully. I think I've got the hang of it now in the next half an hour. Would you like to unmute and join me in the Serenity Prayer to close our little meeting here? There we go. So, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. See you soon, everyone. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you.